In early 2026, the U.S. economy looked like it was gliding toward a soft landing. The Federal Reserve had just wrapped up an easing cycle spanning 2024 to 2025, carefully stepping interest rates down by 1.75 percentage points. Traders were confident in the trajectory. The inflation data was cooperating, and markets were pricing in another quarter-point rate cut by June. Then, the baseline shattered. A late February military conflict between the U.S. and Iran erupted. The fighting immediately bottlenecked one of the world's most critical shipping channels, disrupting global oil flows and sending Brent crude spiking past $110 a barrel. What started as a localized military skirmish thousands of miles away instantly derailed the Federal Reserve's carefully calibrated domestic policy. The true economic cost of that disruption became official on April 10th, when the Bureau of Labor Statistics released its March Consumer Price Index report. This chart shows the month-over-month change in headline inflation. After months of flat, manageable data, March posts an aggressive, vertical 0.9% surge, the largest single-month increase in nearly 4 years. Zooming out to the year-over-year timeline, that single monthly jump pushes the annual headline inflation rate to 3.3%. That specific number killed any immediate hopes for borrowing relief. The highly anticipated June interest rate cut vanished from market models, with easing expectations shoved all the way back to the fourth quarter of the year. Instead of a predictable path down, investors are now scrambling to navigate a hostile and highly uncertain economic timeline. So, what exactly is driving that violent jump in the March data? The answer is almost entirely energy. We are looking at a highly concentrated, localized shock. At the consumer level, the impact is unavoidable. Gasoline prices alone surged 21.2% in March. That specific spike at the pump accounted for nearly 3/4 of the entire month's total inflation increase. To understand the broader economy, economists look at something called core inflation. This is a metric that strips out the volatile, fast-moving costs of food and energy to give us a clearer picture of underlying economic health. Core inflation reveals a surprisingly calm reality. Underlying prices rose just 0.2% for the month. Categories like medical care, personal care, and used cars actually saw price declines. We are looking at a bifurcated economy, a headline inflation number artificially inflamed by a distant war, running parallel to a subdued, cooling core economy. This split data creates a massive problem for the Federal Reserve. They cannot lower interest rates right now. A 3.3% headline inflation rate is simply too high, and the pain at the gas pump is far too visible to consumers to justify easing. But they don't need to raise rates either. That mild 0.2% core inflation reading proves that consumer demand isn't overheating. The underlying mechanics of the economy are actually behaving. As a result, the central bank is effectively frozen. They are locked into holding the federal funds rate exactly where it is, between 3.50 and 3.75% for the foreseeable future. The aggressive rate cuts made over the last 2 years are currently acting as a buffer. That accumulated easing buys the Fed time to wait out the data, but it does not grant them immunity from what comes next. On April 7th, a fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran offered a brief reprieve, granting bond markets a momentary sigh of relief. If that ceasefire holds and oil prices recede, the pressure valve releases. The Fed might squeeze through a narrow window to resume cutting rates in the second half of 2026. But the negotiations are delicate. If peace talks collapse and the conflict re-escalates, Brent crude will stay elevated. This diagram illustrates the structural risk. Sustained high energy costs will eventually leak into the broader economy, driving up overhead for shipping and manufacturing, which then pushes up prices for core consumer services across the board. If that happens, we face a return to 1970s-style stagflation, stagnant economic growth paired with stubborn inflation. It is the exact scenario the Fed is desperate to avoid. The consequences of this paralysis don't stop at the U.S. border. When the Federal Reserve is forced to hold interest rates high, it artificially props up the value of the U.S. dollar. A dominant dollar compounds financing costs for emerging market economies, punishing any nation that has to service its national debt in U.S. currency. Across sub-Saharan Africa, dollar-denominated debt servicing pressures are already elevated. High U.S. rates push these vulnerable economies straight to the brink. The stability of the global financial system is currently tied to the price of oil. And right now, that price is held hostage by a fragile peace treaty in the Middle East.